Okay, so this evening I thought we'd take a little bit different turn on things and look at some of the Theravada and teachings of Buddhism. This is from the middle length discourses of the Buddha. And the sutta is called the Mahapunama Sutta, translated as the greater discourse on the full moon night. So in the Buddha's time, the full moon was the traditional time when they recited the precepts. So the Buddha apparently gave a Dharma talk at that time to all of his monks. And actually, it wasn't intended Dharma talk, it appears. It was a question that one of the monks had for the Buddha. And the Buddha's response to it I think is worth giving our ears to. Thus have I heard, on one occasion, the Blessed One, that's a way of referring to the Buddha, the Blessed One, was living at Savatthi in the Eastern Park in the palace of Migara's mother. So he's staying in the palace of Migara. I'm not sure who that is, but Migara's mother. On that occasion, on the Uposatha day of the 15th on the full moon night, so that's again referring to the recitation of the precepts, the Blessed One was seated in the open, surrounded by the Sangha of bhikkhus. So he's surrounded by all of these seekers. Then a certain bhikkhu rose from his seat, arranged his upper robe on one shoulder, and extending his hand in reverential salutation towards the Blessed One, said to him. So I think it's interesting here. Just take a moment to imagine this monk. First of all, the note on this monk says that he knew the answer to the question he posed. So you wonder, why would he pose this question if he knew the answer already? Do you know? Why would he pose a question that he knew the answer to already?
To inspire others.
Exactly. So for others' sake. So he was teaching a group of monks himself, and these monks weren't getting this particular teaching, and so he decided he would refer to a higher authority, namely the Buddha, and ask the Buddha the question himself, to clarify this for his students. And I think it says, so Venerable Sir, he's referring to the Buddha here. Venerable Sir, I would ask the Blessed One about a certain point. If the Blessed One would grant me an answer to my question. I love the way it's an epithet for the Buddha. He doesn't call him the Buddha directly. He calls him the Blessed One. This is a really super respectful way of referring to a deeply realized human being. And we should keep in mind here that the Buddha is a human. He's not a god. He wasn't like this. He was born just like anybody else was. He just practiced really ardently. And the sutras say for many, many lifetimes. But you can say that he practiced really hard, and he had deeply refined his attention. Venerable Sir, I would like to ask the Blessed One about a certain point. The Blessed One, the Buddha says, sit on your own seat, bhikkhu, and ask what you like. I recently heard a talk given by Thomas Merton, who was a Trappist monk who died in the 1960s, but he was one of the Catholic monks he was really the first Catholic to really engage in sincere and humble dialogue with Buddhists and Hindus. So he was kind of a real bridge maker, Thomas Merton. And while he was talking about the importance in monastic life of being able to stand on your own 2 feet. What does that mean to stand on your own 2 feet? The Buddha talks about being a light unto yourself. And here that was the Buddha. One of the Buddha's last teachings is about being a light unto yourself. Don't depend on somebody else to uncover the truth for you. Find it for yourself. Look into your own heart and mind and wake up yourself. And it's also about not being in a kind of codependent type relationship, or codependent where one person is kind of using another, but there's a sense of mutuality, of trust, and of love. That's what it means, I think, here to stand on your own feet. But he says, sit on your own seat. And I think this is a similar sentiment. Sit on your own seat and teach from the place that you're sitting. Well, he doesn't say this, but it's... And again, this is all kind of going under... The bhikkhu himself is asking a question that he knows the answer to. He's asking it for these other monks. And the Buddha's recognizing that, I think, when he says, sit down on your own seat. Ask what you like. So the bhikkhu sat on his own seat and said, said to the Blessed One, are these not, Venerable Sir, the 5 aggregates affected by clinging? So he's asking, what are the 5 aggregates affected by clinging? You know what clinging is?
Attachment?
Yeah, attachment. Yeah, are they affected? And he's kind of clarifying the 5 aggregates. He says, that is the material form. So it's believed that in Buddhism we're comprised of what's called 5 aggregates or 5 skandhas. It's not really a belief, it's just that's how they viewed a human being in the time of the Buddha. That's how the Buddha made sense of this body-mind. We call it a body and mind. You know, in the West we talk about a body and senses and the mind. And the way that in the Buddha's time in India, the way they articulated it is they talked about it as the 5 skandhas or 5 heaps. And these are material form, feeling, perception, formations, which means mental formations, referring to the mental formations that form in our mind. And the 5th one is consciousness. So those are the 5, what are called the 5 aggregates, and that's how the Buddha explained what a human being is. And when you have all of those 5 things come together, you have a human being. And when any one of those 5 are no longer present, you no longer have a human being. So the Buddha responds, these bhikkhus are the 5 aggregates affected by clinging. That is, the material form aggregate affected by clinging. And then he goes on all the way through the consciousness. So form, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, consciousness. That's who we are. That's what this body-mind contraption is. These five aggregates. Good, Venerable Sir, the bhikkhu delighted and rejoiced in the Blessed One's words. Then he asked him a further question. Okay, so first he's clarifying that the 5 skandhas are affected by this thing that the Buddha teaches about called clinging. And clinging, if you remember, this is the root of suffering. Clinging or attachment, another way of thinking about it is unwholesome desire, or reaching out for that which is not self and making it into self. Venerable Sir, in what are these 5 aggregates affected by clinging rooted? This is a kind of an awkward question. Let me read it again. Venerable Sir, he's addressing the Buddha here. In what are these 5 aggregates affected by clinging rooted? What's that? Yeah, ignorance, okay. Well, the Buddha responds, he says, these 5 aggregates affected by clinging are rooted in desire. And the note there says craving. Another way of talking about, is it craving? Let me double check that, hold on. It's not attachment, but I mean, it could be. Just all of these there's subtleties in the language. Okay. Craving, yeah. So it's another way of talking of desire or craving, which is the origin of the suffering comprised by the 5 aggregates. So that's what we're talking about here is craving. You know, what does craving feel like? When you think about craving, what does it feel like in your body when you're craving something? Say, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be something bad.
Heat.
Heat? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Where do you feel heat? Abdomen? Okay, yeah. Sometimes when I think about craving, like if I'm craving ice cream or something, I feel it in my chest, kind of heart area, and there's this kind of almost feel like my heart itself is reaching out. You know, that's craving. You know, craving is wanting something that is not these 5 aggregates, kind of wanting to incorporate it in.
Sometimes it feels like I go into
autopilot. Autopilot, okay. So you're not present.
Yeah. It's like, sometimes you get so hungry, and then you sit down with a big meal, and then it's just like,
yeah, you're not.
Just chew through it like a machine.
Yeah.
And I realized, well, I didn't actually enjoy that at all. Just more, shove it in.
Yeah. I think that's a great description. So just not even aware of what you're doing when you're doing it. Yeah, I think that's right on. And this is the origin of suffering. This is the origin of suffering. We all do it. Venerable Sir, is that clinging? Now this is a really listen carefully to this question. Is that clinging the same as these 5 aggregates affected by clinging? Or is the clinging something apart from the 5 aggregates affected by clinging? Do you get this question? He's saying, is this clinging, is this craving synonymous with the 5 aggregates? Or is it something different from the 5 aggregates? What would you respond if you had to respond to that?
The previous question was asking what is the root for the cleaning of the 5 aggregates?
Yes.
That means the answer craving, which means it is the cause, the root. And if it were the root, then it couldn't be the cleaning of the aggregates itself or their aggregates itself.
So you're saying it's not the aggregates themselves that are clinging.
The cleaning of the aggregates is phenomenon. It's a result of craving. So they're different.
So okay, so you're saying that craving is different from the aggregates.
I'm not saying that.
Okay. All right. Well, here's how the Buddha responds. He says, Bhikkhu, that clinging is neither the same as these 5 aggregates affected by clinging, nor is the clinging something apart from the 5 aggregates affected by clinging. So if you want to know where the source of clinging is, he says it's neither in the 5 aggregates, form, feelings, perceptions, mental formation, nor is it separate from those 5 aggregates. And actually, it's not even the point to worry about. It's not even a point to worry about, because the Buddha says later, he says, first the monk asks him, Venerable Sir, can there be diversity in the desire and love lust regarding these 5 aggregates affected by clinging. There can be, Bhikkhu, the Blessed One said. Here, Bhikkhu, someone thinks, may my material form be thus in the future. May my feeling be thus in the future. May my perception be thus in the future. May my formations be thus in the future. May my consciousness be thus in the future. Thus, there is diversity in the desire and lust, another word for craving, regarding these 5 aggregates affected by clinging. So think about that for a second. In this kind of craving takes on different forms. So sometimes it takes on the form of wishing or desiring the body to be different in the future. You know, don't we all have that desire? We want to be, stronger. Maybe we want to be healthier. This is a desire for the future, for the body to be something else in the future. Or we want our mental formations to be sharper or smarter, our thoughts to be clearer. This is a desire for the future for that particular skandha. Something, how does the Buddha say it? May my material form be thus in the future. It's a wish. It's a wish that something about ourselves be different. And the Buddha is just saying that's the cause of suffering, is wanting things to be different than what they are right now. May they, and we oftentimes we wish things would be different than how they are right now. It's not saying that we shouldn't strive for things to be different, but here's another take on our life. It's not just about craving. There's another element of our life. And when we sit, when we're meditating, we can get in touch with that non-clinging dimension of ourselves. And the Buddha is just kind of pointing ourselves back to ourselves here, saying, what if I didn't wish for anything to happen in the future? You can sit with that. What if I didn't wish for any craving for anything, of any of the 5 aggregates for the future? Body, feelings. We all want our feeling to be changed, right? We want to be happy. That's important, right? And, we can be happy. The Buddha just says that it's by accepting our present state, as opposed to trying to make or leap into some other kind of feeling that we don't have right now. It's in accepting the feeling that we have in the present state that it's by resting in the feeling that we have in our present state of mind that we find contentment. All right, there's just a couple more here. This goes on a little bit longer. We're just going to look a little bit more here and then kind of sit with it. The bhikkhu asks further, he says, Venerable Sir, in what way does the term aggregates apply to the aggregates? Bhikkhu, the Buddha responds, any kind of material form, whatever, whether past, future, or present, internal or external, that means your body or another body, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, this is the material form aggregate. Any kind of feeling, whatever, far or near, this is the feeling aggregate. Any kind of perception. It goes through each of those 5, excuse me, I just need some water, that's all. Goes through each of these 5 aggregates and saying the same thing. Whether past, future, present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near. These are the various forms these particular aggregates take. What is the cause and condition, Venerable Sir, for the manifestation of the material form? So, and he's asking, how do we have this form, feeling, perception, mental formation, consciousness? What are the causes of these 5 aggregates? That's the next question he's asking the Buddha. What are the conditions for the arising of these 5? It's another way of asking, why are we here? What are we doing? It's not asking, what are we doing? Why are we here? How did this come about? What's that?
Ignorance.
And the bhikkhu, the Buddha responds, the 4 great elements, bhikkhu, are the cause and condition for the manifestation of the material form aggregate. So if you want to know what's the cause and condition of the form of this body that we have, it's what are known as the 4 elements. Those are the earth element, water, fire, air. That's this body. That's what this body is comprised of. Water, we're 70% water. Earth, bones. Air is breath. Fire, the digestive heat, the heart, the fire that runs through us. That's what this form is made from. He says, contact is the cause and condition for the manifestation of the feeling aggregate. Contact is referring to when the body or the sense organs touch some object. When they make contact with some object outside of itself, feeling arises. Contact is the cause and condition for the manifestation of the perception. Oh, thanks so much. Appreciate that. Contact is also the cause and condition for the manifestation of the perception aggregate. So our perceptions are, the arising of our perception is caused by the contact, the perception organ, if you want to think of it as an organ or an aggregate. When it makes contact with an object, there is the arising of it. Mentality materiality is the cause and condition of the manifestation of the consciousness aggregate. All right, this is a little bit more tricky to explain, but basically, say for example, this is talking about, so there's, for example, 3 elements related to sight. There is the eye, the first one is the eye, second one is the object that the eye sees, and when the eye and that object make contact, you have consciousness. So that's what this is referring to. Mentality, materiality is the cause and condition for the manifestation of consciousness aggregate. So when those 2 arise, or when they make contact together, you have the blossoming of consciousness. Okay, last one I want to share here, and I think this is one that we can probably sit with a little bit. The bhikkhu says, Venerable Sir, how does identity view come to be? So this is identity view is referring to identifying with what you are perceiving with your senses as mine. Not necessarily identifying with it, but claiming it as mine. That's my ice cream, That's my car. That is my textbook. These are my clothes. This is my food. How does identity view come to be? So the Buddha responds, here, an untaught ordinary person who has no regard for noble ones and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, who has no regard for true men and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, regards material form as self, or self as possessed of material form, or material form as in self, or self as in material form. We gotta look at this. What's that?
In psychology, we call it extended self. My house, my shoes, my husband, they're extended self.
Yeah.
Others.
And we don't even have to extend that far. The Buddha is actually coming back to our material, this body itself. Seeing this body as self. Seeing this body itself as self. He said this is how identity view come to be. And the same is true for feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. We do that. We regard feelings, the feelings that we have, as self. And then the bhikkhu asks, that's the last one. Bhikkhu asks, Venerable Sir, how does identity view not come to be? How do we break out? How do we end identity view if this is the problem? And this is what this monk is trying to teach his students. He says, Here, bhikkhu, a well-taught, noble disciple, who has regard for noble ones and is skilled and disciplined in their dhamma, who has regard for true men and is skilled and disciplined in their dhamma, does not regard material form as self, or self as possessed of material form, or material form as in self, or self as in material form. He does not regard feeling as self, perception as self, formations as self, consciousness as self, or self as possessed of consciousness, or consciousness as in self, or self as in consciousness. That is how identity view does not come to be.
There's no self.
This is the teaching. Yeah, there's no self. This is it. This is the teaching on no self, right? So
And this is from which sutra?
this is the middle length discourses of the Buddha. It's called the Mahapunama Sutta.
It's in Mahayana.
This is Theravadan.
Theravada.
Yeah.
They also talk about emptiness.
Not so much emptiness.
But then at least the non-existence of five aggregates or self.
That's it. Yeah, right. This is a teaching on how what a human being is comprised of: form, feeling, perception, mental formation, and consciousness. Those five things are not who we are. who we take to be as ourself is not ourself. So let's sit with that. Let's kind of chew on that for a little bit. All right? Okay. Thank you.
And one can achieve